What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Critter format video, and in this video I'm going to continue discussing this build of the hand control deck that I featured in the last video that I made as well. I think this deck is pretty cool, but it does have some very noticeable flaws, and I think that one of the games I'm going to show today definitely shows off those flaws pretty well. But before we dive into the deck breakdown and the games, as always, if you like this sort of content, if you like seeing Yugi Kaiba and Critter format duels, then please consider subscribing to my channel. We reached 200 subscribers, which is an awesome milestone. Next milestone is 250. It would really be awesome if we could reach 250 by the end of this month. Quarter of the way to 1,000 would be a really cool point to reach. But now that that's out of the way, let's explore hand control. Now, hand control is a deck that aims to discard cards from your opponent's hand, using things like White Magical Hat and Robin Goblin. Now, you can go all in on this strategy, like maybe playing 3 Robin Goblins, 3 White Magical Hats. You could even throw in some Jinzo number 7s to pair with the Robin Goblins. But in practice, I found that going all in can lead to situations where you can wind up in tough spots and not really have a way to deal with them, as all you'll have is hand control cards. So we've slotted in this sort of minor hand control package into a more standard mass control build, which I feel like makes it kind of more of a mass control deck with hand control flavoring in it, but I still count it as hand control. If it's playing more than 1 Robin Goblin, I count it as hand control. So for the specific cards in this deck, we're of course playing 2 Robin Goblin, which is just great at discarding cards from your opponent's hand, or even forcing out things like Waboku and Solemn Judgments and things like that. Those are also pretty good trades, and Robin Goblin will stick around on the field for a bit unless your opponent has like a heavy storm to deal with it. So this can be very powerful even outside of just discarding cards from your opponent's hand, at getting your opponent to use up resources. In addition to the Robin Goblin, we also have a White Magical Hat, which can get in and deal damage and discard cards from your opponent's hand that way. This is good because it can be searched out with something like Sangan or Witch, of which we are playing 2 copies of each. They can search out pretty much any monster in the deck. And given that White Magical Hat is searchable, it can get you some easy access to discards at points where you can actually get in with White Magical Hat. Now, you could play something like Last Will in this deck to also bring out White Magical Hat that way. I've elected to not include a Last Will. I couldn't really think of what to cut. Maybe you could cut down on the Giant Soldiers of Stone to put in a Last Will instead. But I like the way that this deck handles even without Last Will. But if you want to have a ready way to search out the White Magical Hats on command, then Last Will could be a good card to include. In addition, we're also playing 2 Mass Sorcerer as the other sort of card advantage monster in the deck. Mass Sorcerer is a format all-star, and it's just very strong. You can bring it out, it dodges under Trap Hole, which unfortunately White Magical Hat can't do. And it can get in, draw you a card, draw you into more outs for your opponent's board, and this is just an incredibly, incredibly good card. So we're playing it at 2, we could potentially play it at 3, but the deck doesn't really have that much space for it, and with things like Sangan and Witch, we can search it out, so we elected to play it at 2. In addition, we're playing 2 Magician of Faith to recycle our powerful spells, which can be just incredibly, incredibly strong, especially in the late game when you've used up a lot of power spells, most likely. We are playing a Cannon Soldier that can just win games out of nowhere. If you've gotten your opponent down to a low enough life point threshold, then you can just bring out Cannon Soldier, tribute away your field, and kill them. And we are also playing 3 Giant Soldier of Stone and 3 Lodgin. The Lodgin allow you to get more offensive, and the Giant Soldier of Stone allow you to get more defensive. Giant Soldier of Stone is also nice because it pairs extremely well with Robin Goblin. If you set Giant Soldier of Stone, set a Robin Goblin, your opponent attacks into the Giant Soldier, you flip up Robin Goblin. If they don't activate Waboku in response, they're likely to take damage and have to discard a card off of that. So that's a very good sort of combo in this deck. For the spells, we of course are playing the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki. Just incredibly, incredibly strong cards that are somewhat format defining. Speaking of format defining spells, we also have 2 Heavy Storm to clear away our opponent's back row, which can be incredibly good at ensuring that any offensive pushes you have go through. Now, if your opponent chains Waboku, then of course that'll put an end to that. But you have cleared away some of their resources. So Heavy Storm, pretty great. It doesn't pair the best with Robbin' Goblin, as if you have Robbin' Goblin up and you activate Heavy Storm, you will be losing that Robbin' Goblin. But oftentimes, you can control when you activate this so that losing the Robbin' Goblin doesn't actually affect you too badly. We also have 3 Fissure to act as even more removal to allow our monsters like Mass Sorcerer and White Magical Hat to be able to attack directly with ease. And lastly, we have 2 Swords of Revealing Light, which is great at stalling your opponent for a bit to allow you to draw into the cards that you need. For the traps, we are on a Mirror Force, which is just crazy if you actually manage to get it to resolve. It is one of the best traps in the format. We have the 2 Robbin' Goblin, as I've mentioned throughout, basically the central spice of the deck. And we also have 3 Solemn Judgment, which is just a great control tool. This can be great at protecting your Robbin' Goblins from your opponent's Heavy Storms, but also is just good at preventing your opponent from making power plays in general. We also have 3 Trap Hole to act as removal on your opponent's turn. We have 3 Waboku, which can protect your life points, your monsters, and also prevent things like Mass Sorcerer and White Magical Hat from getting their effects off, which is very good. You can also chain Waboku to a Heavy Storm activation, which is very nice as well. That's the main deck. Going on to the side deck, we have a couple different options here. We have 3 Jiraigumo, 3 7-colored fish. If we want to get a bit more aggressive, we can bring these in. We have 3 Maneater Bug if we need more removal. We have 3 Princess of Tsurugi to punish back row heavy decks. We have 2 Card Destruction if the hand control package that we have in the main deck isn't good enough against like an Exodia deck potentially. And we have 1 Mask of Darkness. I think this is a bit of an iffy inclusion. You could probably swap it out for something else. But if you want to like recycle your Robbin' Goblins or potentially your Solemn Judgments, this can be pretty good. Now that we've covered the ins and outs of this deck, let's dive into a duel to see it in action. Okay, we've got a duel against Deo Zomph, who has been featured on the channel quite a bit. They were actually featured in the last hand control video that I made as well. So let's see what they're playing this time. Let's dive into the game. We're on hand control, of course, and we'll see what they're up to here. And we'll see how it pays out for us to play hand control. This is a very good starting hand. It would have been much better if we went first because we could have just set the Giant Soldier, set the Robbin' Goblin, and hopefully profited. But unfortunately, we are going second here, and they're just going to set 2 and pass. Now, we could get aggressive here, summoning out Lojin, trying to attack into their set. That could be the way to go. We could also just go defensive with the Giant Soldier and a Robbin' Goblin set. But we are going to bring out the Lojin, go a bit aggressive here. Attack into the Sangan. They will get a search. They're going to search out Muka Muka, which is pretty rough for us because that will be able to get over the Lojin potentially. Main 2, we're just going to set a Waboku, set a Robbin' Goblin, pass back to them. If they do have a heavy set, then they can clear this board, but we can chain Waboku to it, which will be pretty nice. If they don't have heavy, then we can set up for Robbin' Goblin plays next turn. If they summon out like a Muka Muka to try and attack in to the Lojin, we can Waboku, and then Fissure it away next turn, attack in for damage, discard a card. It's just a pretty good plan all around, I think. They are going to bring out the Muka Muka, and they are going to attack in here. And, oh, I guess we are going to take it. I guess we're going to save the Muka Muka for later. We can always get in with the Giant Soldier if we so wish. We're going to bring out Giant Soldier and try fissuring away their Muka Muka. Unfortunately, they have Solemn Judgment, so they will keep their Muka Muka alive here, and this is quite unfortunate for us as we don't have a way to get in for damage, and they activate Heavy Storm to make things even worse. We are going to Waboku, so that way, you know, our Giant Soldier is at least protected, but we're in a really rough spot now. Pot of Greed can hopefully help us out of that spot, but not with draws like that. We'll set the Giant Soldier, set another Giant Soldier, set a Heavy Storm of our own to bluff them into setting more cards, hopefully. And they're just going to attack into the Giant Soldier and set 1, pass back. Unfortunately, with Muka Muka on the field, they're not really incentivized to set that much. So I think it makes sense that they're trying to play a bit more conservatively here. But, you know, we just got to pass the field like this. And Mass Sorcerer is pretty rough because they'll be able to draw an additional card here. They're going to attack over Giant Soldier, attack in with Mass Sorcerer. We'll take 900. They'll draw, activate swords, pass back to us. Good thing is this is the perfect time to activate Heavy Storm, and we will do that. And bring out Lojin, clear that Mass Sorcerer. But while that's nice, it doesn't really help us out that much. We're just going to set the Trap Hole and pass. Maybe we should have set Judgment in case they have a Heavy Storm to clear away our only form of interaction. But I think this is okay enough. If they heavy the one... Yep, they do have Heavy. If they heavy the one card, that's not the worst thing in the world. Trap Hole doesn't deal with the problem at hand. It would just prevent them from getting out more monsters on the field. And they will bring out another monster on the field, so that is kind of rough because they'll be able to crash the Lodgin into our Lodgin and attack in for 18. Oh, they're going to Reborn here. Okay, so they're going to Reborn out a Lodgin, and now they'll crash that way. That's actually not the worst for us because that means that their Muka Muka is down to only 1500 attack, which is beatable. So if we draw another beater, then that can be very nice here. Unfortunately, we just draw Waboku, so I think we just set Waboku. It looks like we're setting our whole hand, because if they have like a Judgment or something to negate the Waboku, then we are pretty much just dead. So I think we need to set the Judgment as well. It's kind of iffy. They're going to switch the Lodge into defense, attack in with the Muka Muka. And then they're just going to set one and pass. And we're going to draw. We draw another Judgment. We might as well set it since we're going all in on the back row here. They're going to switch the Lodge into attack, and we could activate Waboku here, but we feel like we don't really need to. If they do have a Cannon Soldier to kill us out of nowhere, we have 2 Judgments set. So, like, we can handle it. So we're not the most worried about that. They've used up Reborn as well, so they won't be able to get it back easily. So we're just going to take the 18 here. It's kind of rough. We're in a very tough spot. But hopefully we can draw something that can get us out of it. White Magical Hat is not a way to get us out of it. We're just going to set the White Magical Hat, pass back to them. They're going to Swords and switch Muka to attack and try and attack in. We're going to Waboku to protect our White Magical Hat. But Robin Goblin will not be the card to get us out of this. And that will be the end of the game. So I think that game 1 showed a major problem with hand control, in that the hand control cards don't really do anything on their own. At the end of the game there, we drew White Magical Hat and Robin Goblin when we just needed something to be able to get rid of our opponent's monsters, and we couldn't draw something that could do that. So while the hand control cards can be incredibly strong if they actually are able to pull off their effects, when you're in a tight spot, drawing them can be pretty bad. And that is a major flaw with Robin Goblin. Also, Robin Goblin can be cleared with Heavy, as you saw in that game as well. And that can be pretty rough. It might not be able to get you any advantage that way. But that's game 1. Game 2, I think we side out of the White Magical Hat. But I could be wrong. We'll see. Looks like we are going first here. And this is a pretty decent hand. We can just set a Witch, set a Trap Hole, pass back to them. And it looks like that's what we're going to do. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, and we're going to think about it because Lodgin doesn't get over Giant Soldier, so we might want to save the Trap Hole for later. But we are just going to Trap Hole it. This enables us to get more aggressive next turn. We're going to bring out another Witch, just attack in for 2200 here. If they manage to clear this board, we get 2 cards to hand, so we're feeling pretty good about that. We're just going to set a Waboku and pass back to them. They are going to clear the board away, and we'll be able to get 2 beaters. So we're going to get a Lodgin and a Gumo. So yeah, we sided out the White Magical Hat for a Jirai Gumo, I guess. And they're going to pass back to us. Another Solemn is okay for later. They're going to Trap Hole the Lodgin that we try to bring out. And we aren't going to set the Solemn, and we get a little bit punished for it because they are able to Magician of Faith to get back Dark Hole. If we had the Solemn set, we could have potentially prevented that. Although, arguably, we wouldn't have wanted to, because dropping down to 4K is pretty bad, and while Dark Hole is strong, it does clear their board away too, so there are ways to play around it a little bit. But I think we probably just should have set the Judgment. We were trying to play around Heavy Storm, I think, but they're going to attack in here, and we are just going to take it all. We do have the Waboku set, but I think we're saving it for if they have like a Mass Sorcerer or something like that. And they do lose the coin flip on Gumo, though, which is very nice. And they're just going to set 2 and pass. Lodgin's pretty good. We could attack in to the Magician of Faith. I guess we're not, because we want them to attack in with Gumo and just keep having their life points potentially. So we're setting a Giant Soldier Stone, which nothing that they have can get over except for Jirai Gumo. So I think this is a pretty heads up play, and it's a pretty conservative play. We're not getting too aggressive here. We're just biding our time till they reach a point where we can potentially kill them out of nowhere if they have their life points to low enough. They're going to bring out a Sangan and just attack in here. And let's see if they call the coin flip right. They do this time, which, 50-50. So they've called one right, one wrong. So it makes sense. And they're just going to attack in with everything else. So we're going to drop down 13. They'll pass back to us. Fisher isn't the best here, but I think we're just going to go for the Gumo, attacking in to Magician of Faith, dropping them down to 1,000. And we think that's worth paying half our life points for. Yep, looks like that is going to be fine on their part. And we do call it right, so we don't actually have to have our life points, which is very nice. And they're going to think about it a bit, but they are just going to take the 19 and pass back to us. They're going to go immediately into battle and try attacking into Gumo. We are going to flip Waboku in response. And this is another reason why we did this, because in doing this, we drop them down to a very low value, and we potentially get to clear the Gumo anyways. So we activate Waboku. They flip up their coin. And I think this is actually, I don't know exactly how this works. I think if Waboku gets chained to Gumo, then Gumo's effect happens later. But technically, I guess we didn't have to chain Waboku to the Gumo effect. We could have waited till afterwards. And so let's just say that we waited till afterwards to chain Waboku. So they called it right anyways, so it doesn't matter. But they're going to chain Solemn, and then in a new chain, they're going to activate Waboku. As a note, you can't chain normal trap cards to counter trap cards, because counter trap cards have something called Spell Speed 3, which means the only thing that can react to them are other counter trap cards. But it doesn't really matter in this situation, because you can always activate Waboku in a new chain before you actually enter the damage step here. So the Jirai Gumo will die. They're going to flip up Robin Goblin and try and attack in. And we could potentially let this go through. However, with them at 500 life points, we could just potentially kill them if we bring out Lojin. We wouldn't be in a terrible spot if Lojin gets discarded, because we can always summon out Giant Soldier, attack into Sangan, drop them down to 200, and then Fisher away their Gumo. But if the two cards in hand aren't both traps that can stop us from bringing out Lojin and attacking into Sangan, then we're pretty set, because we have two Solemns here. So if we use up a Solemn now, we'll still have one Solemn for the next turn to prevent them from disrupting the Lojin into Sangan play. So I think we are just going to activate Solemn in response and bet that they don't have two ways to stop us from killing Sangan with Lojin. We will drop down a fair bit here, because the Sangan attack will happen after the Solemn Judgment has negated their Robin Goblin, which means that we will drop down to 2100 and then take 1000. But I think it was worth it. And they're just going to set 1, which means that we do actually win the game here, because Solemn can just negate whatever they have set if it's actually something real. And it looks like it was not. It was just a heavy storm. So that's game 2. And I think that was actually a really good one. And I think it showed off how powerful Solemns can be. Just giving you that extra push of confidence to set up lethal plays can be very powerful. But we're going to go into game 3. And I think I keep the deck the same as I had in game 2. We'll find out here, because I think it did pretty well for us. We do know they're on Gumo now, so I think having a Gumo of our own is pretty nice. We might have actually swapped out some Giant Soldiers because we know they're on Gumo, but I don't remember. They're just going to set 2 and pass back to us. And this is a bit of a thinker for what we want to do. We could, of course, bring out Gumo and try and attack, as that will clear anything they have set. But that's risking dropping down to half our life points very early in the game. And we don't necessarily want to do that if we do get it wrong. Also, if they have like a trap hole, then trap holing a Gumo would be very strong for them here. We could also just bring out a Witch or a Sangan and try attacking in, but if it's Mass Sorcerer set, then we get majorly punished for that. Now, to be fair, we didn't actually see any Mass Sorcerers in game 2, so they could have sided out of them. But I think it's better to play safe than sorry. So we're just going to set a Witch, set a Trap Hole, and pass back to them. If they summon out something that can get over Witch, we can always just Trap Hole it. They're going to Swords, Fissure away the Witch, which means we will get a search here. And we're going to grab a Lodgin, which is just a really good beater. You know, we can summon it out instead of the Gumo if we want to get aggressive without risking half our life points. They're going to flip up Sangan and just attack in for 1,000. That's fine by us. And they're going to pass back to us. Oh, they're going to set one and pass back to us. That doesn't change anything that we do, so that's fine. And we've got a bit of a thinker here. We could just bring out a Gumo as a wall, which isn't the worst thing to do. They'd have to expend some resource to get over it, so that might just be what we go with. We're going to think about it for a bit. We could just set a Sangan as well, just to get another monster to hand. And that's what we're going to do. They're going to flip up Magician of Faith, adding back a Fissure. And they're just going to attack in. So they do attack into our Sangan. We're going to add a Mass Sorcerer because they don't currently have anything that can get over the Mass Sorcerer yet. So if we set the Mass Sorcerer, backed up by a Trap Hole, that's very strong. Dark Hole's pretty nice. It can clear their board away, although we don't necessarily want to do that yet, as they don't really have anything worth clearing away right now. We're just going to set the Mass Sorcerer, pass back to them. They're going to switch everything to defense because they know that we have a Mass Sorcerer, and it's very likely that we set that Mass Sorcerer. So there's no reason for them to keep them in attack. And we draw a Lodgin. We're just going to set the Lodgin as well because, I mean, if they Raigeki our board, that's pretty rough, to be fair. But if they don't, you know, we can Trap Hole anything above 1,000 attack, and they can't get over this Lodgin with Sangan or Magician, so we're feeling good about that. Maybe we should have set the Solemn, just in case they had, like, a Dark Hole or Raigeki. That would be pretty rough for us. But I think we've got enough beaters in hand to recover from that, if that's the case, and we don't really want to play into heavy. They're just going to set one, pass back to us, and now we have the chance to get a bit aggressive here. The only risk is if they have, like, a Mirror Force or something. That would be pretty rough. We're going to bring out a Lodgin. They're going to Trap Hole that away. So we're just going to flip up Lodgin and Mass Sorcerer. We could have kept Mass Sorcerer set for next turn, because this does play into Mirror Force a little bit. But we're not really too worried if they have a Mirror Force set. They can clear this board away, and we've still got plenty of options for later. But we're just going to try and clear this. So we do successfully manage to clear their board away. They had a Muka Muka, which can be pretty rough for us, but we do have Trap Hold at least, so we'll be able to do something about that. They're going to bring out the Muka Muka, and we Trap Hole, but they do have a Solemn Judgment, so they will be able to keep the Muka Muka on field. But unlike in previous games, we do have multiple outs to this. We have a Dark Hole, we have Maneater Bug. Gumo can probably get over it as well. So honestly, we're not too torn up about that. We will take 1,500 from this Muka Muka attack. They're going to Fissure away the Lodgin and pass back to us. That Muka Muka is at 2,100 now, so we could bring out a Jirai Gumo and just try getting over it. But I don't think we need to. I think we can just set the Maneater Bug and then back it up with a Judgment maybe. I don't know. It's kind of iffy. There's a lot of options that we have here, a lot of things that we can think about doing here. We could just Dark Hole the Muka Muka away, attack him with Cannon Soldier. We could Dark Hole the Muka Muka away, attack him with Gumo, dropping them down to 18 and putting them potentially in Cannon Soldier range for a future turn. We just have an abundance of choices here. We are just going to do the Maneater Bug Solemn Judgment play, which I think is a pretty good play. And they're just going to bring out a Witch. They're going to attack in with the Muka Muka. We're going to pop the Muka Muka, and we'll take 11 from the Witch. That's perfectly fine by us. And they're going to set one and pass back to us. Now could be a good time to bring out the Gumo, as it drops them down to 1,100, which wouldn't be the worst. There is a risk of us taking 2050 here, though, so it's a bit iffy. We are going to bring out the Gumo, though, and just try attacking in. We're going to call heads. Hopefully we call it right, but let's see here. We do call it right. Okay, that's good. They'll take 11. If we called it wrong, it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, but it could have put us into a tough spot later. They're going to search out a Lodgin, and we're going to activate swords just in case. If they've got heavy, we've got a solemn for that, so we're not too concerned. And they still have to find a way to get over the Gumo. They will activate heavy here, and we're going to think about it because it's not the end of the world if they do clear our back row away, but it could be a sign that they have some way to kill us here. If they have Change of Heart plus Lodgin, then that's 4,000 already. They just need like a Cannon Soldier or a Reborn or something like that to get us in lethal range. So I think we are just going to Solemn here because we don't quite know what they have planned and we don't want to risk it. So we're going to take 2050, but they reveal they have another heavy, which is really rough for us. It means that we will lose our swords. They can potentially attack in here, and if they have a Change of Heart or a Reborn or something that can allow them to get in for lethal, then we are just dead. They have a Fissure to get over the Gumo, and they'll bring in a Lodgin and attack in. But honestly, that's fine. 250 is not dead. They activate swords of their own to hopefully protect themselves, but we've got a heavy, so we're just going to heavy that away. Dark Hole their monster and summon out Gumo, because we figure at this point, we just want to press for lethal as soon as possible. We don't want to draw out the game any longer. So we're going to bring out Gumo, attack them down to 700, and if we can survive this next turn, we can just potentially win here with Cannon Soldier tributing away the field. We do have a Trap Hole as well, which can protect against any normal summons that they have. And we lose the coin toss, but honestly, 250 and 125 are basically the same thing at this point. We're going to set a Trap Hole, pass back to them. They're going to set 2 and pass back to us, but we're feeling pretty good about this. Monster Reborn makes this basically a done deal, because if they have Trap Hole or Solemn Judgment for the Cannon Soldier, we can just Reborn it back. So we're going to bring out the Cannon Soldier, get tributing, and that will be the end of the game. So man, what a wild set. Those were some good games, and very, very close, as you know, the life totals at the end of this game show. But you know, I don't really think we won those games off of the back of hand control. I think we won the games off the back of mass control. And we sided out of hand control actually after game 1. I mean, I think we still had the Robins in deck, but we didn't actually see them, so they didn't actually matter. And, you know, I think this shows one of the flaws of hand control in that against aggressive decks, like the one Deo Zelm was playing, it can really suffer because it really needs a way to clear the board away to get in damage, either paired with Robin Goblin or with White Magical Hat. And if your opponent is playing an aggressive deck, then you kind of got to rely on the other elements of the deck to actually try and get a win. We were able to win the match, but it was very, very close. And game 1 we lost because of the hand control aspects. So I think that's pretty damning for the deck in this matchup. That being said, we did manage to pull out a win in the end. So I do think the deck can recover pretty well and side into things that can shore up its weaknesses in certain matchups. This will probably be the last bit of hand control I show off for a little bit because I want to cover other decks in the channel as well. But I will likely return to this deck, probably playing the Jinzo number 7 variant of it, to see how that deck plays out. I do think that this is a fairly fun deck in the format, and there are a lot of different ways that you can go with hand control. And when you actually do manage to discard a card from your opponent's hand, it's just very, very fun and very powerful. It's just getting to those points that can be a bit tough. But that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.